Dear sisters and brothers, my dear young friends, once again, it's my honor and pleasure in talking to you. I could recall 2 years ago in Rwanda when I met many of you. I still feel that energy, that enthusiasm. I still feel that warmth and love and compassion. And I still feel the power of African dream that came through African youth, students. ASU has pioneered so many things for equality, justice, and humanity. Under the leadership of dear friends, including my very, very adorable younger brother Peter, Angela, and many more friends, Edmund, you too. That time, all of us raised voice for 100 million campaign. And you have shown the leadership, particularly Peter, you by joining and being one of the founding members of the 100 million trust, which has been incorporated in the Netherlands. But after that, your voices for fair share, for justice, for 1 in 5, during the last year's United Nations General Assembly, also during the time of Laureates and Leaders Summit in this September, you have proven that African young people and students are going to lead the young people of the world. You cannot afford, and you will not afford, to lose the entire generation to this common enemy of COVID-19, the pandemic. So, dear friends, this brings hope not only to African continent, but to the rest of the world. And I personally have faith in you. I always say that Africa is the mirror of the world. And if things are not well in Africa, perhaps the world is not in good shape. We have all experienced many injustices, inequalities, apathy. The pandemic has exposed and exacerbated it. So that's why I call this pandemic is not only a health crisis or an economic crisis. It is the crisis of justice. It is the crisis of morality. And it is the crisis of civilization. A new world is under shaping. What kind of world we wanted to make? Who is going to decide on it? If the same players, if the same actors, if the same decision makers are going to take it on, then I'm afraid that we can never get that justice and equality which we are all fighting for, especially the young people. We cannot simply depend on those leaders, because the real leaders, not of tomorrow, but for today's leaders, are you. The leaders are in you. The change which is knocking the door, and we have to embrace that change, will not come from outside. This change is you. This change is within you. And therefore, 100 million campaign, ASU, which is one of the leaders of this campaign, as well as Nobel laureates, world leaders, and other moral authorities have joined hands together. And we have all collectively gave a call, fair share for children. We have never been able to get the fair share in any walk of life. And therefore, the young people have to demand the fair share in polity, in economy, fair share in policies and enforcement of laws, fair share in education, fair share in all walks of life. As you know, that the wealthiest countries have announced 8 or more, but at least $8 trillion as the COVID-19 response fund. But we also know, and we also feel pain and anger, that most of the money is allocated to rescue their own economies. That is not bad. They should. But some single industries are being given more money than the cumulative support from the developing countries and marginalized people. Is it not immoral and shameful that only 0.3% of this $8 trillion is being allocated for the marginalized people through the multilateral support? Not even 1% or 0.5%, 0.13%. I know that the conventional politicians and politics can tolerate it. But the people like you, my dear young friends, who fought many battles and won many battles against apartheid, against colonialism, against many forms of injustice, even in the universities and colleges, on the issues of fee rise, on the issues of other kind of inequalities and injustice, your voice could not be ignored by anyone. And that voice, which has a lot of purity and power, is needed for the rest of the world for this fair share campaign. We have also demanded that at least $1 trillion, which is fraction of that money, which they are spending for their people, for their businesses, financial institutions, and industries. This fraction of $1 trillion must be immediately allocated for the marginalized children and their families in the developing countries, low-income countries. This is going to help in saving the life of 70 million people. And if we are not going to do it, we know that 24 million children will not see their classrooms again. We know that dozens of millions of children would be found on streets and factories and mines and prostitute houses. Children who were holding pencils and books in their classrooms would be forced to take guns, would be forced to take tools in their hands. Can you tolerate this? I know your anger inside you, and I call upon you to be angry. Not for violence, not for revenge, not for destruction. Your anger must be channelized in good ideas, innovative ideas, and collective action to lead Africa and to lead the world. Next year is important. United Nations has announced this year as the International Year for the Elimination of Child Labor. And we know that Africa, some part of Asia, some part of Latin America remain the home of exploitation of children. I have visited many places in Africa, many countries in Africa. Some countries and some places which were very difficult to reach. I told this story which is so close to my heart. One day I was sitting in a very remote village in Ivory Coast, Koteva, where the children were working in cocoa beans farms. And as you know, chocolate is a dozens of billion, over $100 billion industry. And these American and European companies, some Japanese or Australian companies, are flourishing at the cost of sweat and blood of those children. When I was talking to them and I asked a group of them, my dear sons, my dear daughters, how do you like chocolate? These boys and girls having bruises and scars on their bodies looked at each other with empty eyes. They were murmuring, what is chocolate? They were asking to each other. I said, chocolate is a sweet candy bar. Children all across the world love chocolate. But I was so ashamed. As my children, my daughters and my sons, who is losing their childhood and their freedom and their future for making this cocoa bean and chocolate, had never seen, had never tasted chocolate. I cannot allow this to happen. And I call upon you, my dear friends, that this justice must go. This justice must end. Injustice must end. This injustice must go. And therefore, the next year, Peter, in your leadership and the leadership of many of the young friends, I know you are planning a big campaign that would be finalized and announced soon. But let me repeat it again, that people like me were hoping that the world will learn some lesson from this pandemic. The lesson of unity, the lesson of compassion, the lesson of mutual responsibility, universalization of responsibility, and the lesson of globalization of compassion. How can we survive without each other, walking on the same earth, facing the same enemy of pandemic? Unfortunately, we don't see much positive results in it. But it does not mean that the powerful voices and the purity of your hearts, the brilliance of your minds, young people, is going to stop us in globalization of compassion. Nothing can stop us in universalization of justice. Nothing can stop us in building equality and equity in the world. And that's why no leader, no country, no society can do it alone. It could be done, and it would be done through the unity of students and the youth across the globe. I'm so happy and so proud that during last few years, after the launch of this campaign and after my participation in Asys Rwanda conference, we have seen that the right from Liberia to Zimbabwe, from Kenya to Chad, from Burkina to Cameroon, we have seen how the youth were mobilized, and not only they raised some policy issues, global policy issues profoundly, but they also, in many countries, they have also been able to mobilize and galvanize the communities for the betterment of marginalized children. Dear friends, we have to ensure that the governments allocate fair share in their countries, in their budgetary allocations. 20% for 20% marginalized people. We cannot compromise, we cannot stop. We cannot tolerate. We have to get it 20% for 20% people. And this is not for now. This is not only from the COVID-19 relief funds or COVID-19 response funds. It should be a culture. It should be a new norm, 20% for 20% people. And also in case of ODA funds, we have to ensure that 20% of ODA should go for 20% marginalized children and their families in the low-income countries. 20% for 20% every aspect of life. I once again applaud your leadership. Remember, dear friends, that we as young people cannot be a part, if some fuel or lubricant of a big system, of a big engine, what we call the growth engine. The people who are the controllers of that growth engine, they just throw a bite of bread in the name of career, in the name of good job, in the name of good life. But what they are getting out of it, they are using us, young people, and we have to stop it. We have to understand it and stop it. We should not be manipulated and misguided by certain politicians, because the future is in our hands. They are not the future of the world. You are the future of the world. Whatever we see today should not happen tomorrow as injustice and inequality. And I once again express my fullest solidarity as your friend, as your brother, though I am 66-year-old, but you can cut me half, not my body, but my age. So you can consider me 33 or even 23. I won't mind if you consider me 23, just decrease my 40 years. So that is fine for me, because I strongly believe that those who have courage to question and those who have resilience and persistence to find the answer to those questions against any wrong, they can never become old. So you should have courage to question, each one of you. You are the source of power. And once again, I thank you for listening to me. You can always count on me as your brother and a kind of household Nobel laureate. So there are so many young Nobel laureates. You can always consider and count on them. But Kailash Satyarthi is your brother, friend, and your own Nobel laureate. And I will follow you. You are my leaders. You are my champion. Thank you so much.